Thank you, and welcome to all of you here, as well those in our viewing audience. Again, my name is Allison Poirier, and I will be the moderator today. Our topic is cognitive behavioral therapy, also known as thinking for a change. We are very lucky to have 5 extremely skilled panelists to talk with us today, and I am going to allow them to introduce themselves, starting with Dr. Ola.
Hi, I'm Dr. Ron Ola. I'm a psychologist with the Adult Parole Authority.
My name is Andrew Davis. I work with Reentry Stabilization Program.
Hi, my name is Lisa Morgan. I'm the reentry coordinator for the Columbus Region Adult Parole Authority.
I'm Wesley Pullen, owner-operator of Resilience, a nonprofit here in Columbus.
My name is Dr. Lewis Donnelly. I'm a consultant for the Impact Organization as well as Columbus Public Schools.
All right, and to get this started with a bang, we're going to start with Dr. Ola, and he is going to explain to us exactly what cognitive behavioral therapy, also known as thinking for a change, what it is, as well how these folks sitting at the table were trained.
Okay, thank you, Allison. Yeah, cognitive behavioral therapy is the generic term which describes treatment or intervention approaches that aim at changing behavior by changing how a person thinks. It sort of looks at thoughts, attitudes, and beliefs, and that if we change how we think about things, that can lead to changes in behavior. Thinking for a change is one specific application of cognitive behavioral therapy. It is an integrated approach that was developed by the National Institute of Corrections. It incorporates 3 basic approaches. There's a social skills component, there is a problem-solving component, and there is a cognitive self-change component, which is the real heart of the cognitive behavioral element of it there, which involves helping folks learn how to pay attention to their thoughts and feelings, their attitudes and beliefs, to learn how to identify the risky thoughts, feelings, attitudes, and beliefs that might lead them to do things to get in trouble, and then to come up with new thinking that can be more constructive to help them avoid repeating patterns in their lives. This program is offered in a variety of settings in the community, inside prisons, through the Adult Parole Authority. And the training for it, Lisa Morgan and I were privileged to be trained by the National Institute of Corrections to train group facilitators. So we went through a training that allows us then to train folks in a 4-day, very intensive training session to learn how to do this program. It involves, we provide some background, theoretical information about cognitive behavioral interventions, about social skills, about problem solving, about the need to help people change their lives in this way. We show people how this program is run. We demonstrate how to conduct some of the group sessions, and we also give folks a chance to try out the actual lessons. We have them practice leading groups in our training sessions. It's a pretty comprehensive 4-day training experience. That's how folks become Thinking for a Change facilitators.
Okay, great, thank you. And then we have Mr. Andrew Davis, who has just completed the 4-day training. So I'd like him to take some time, if you wouldn't mind, Andrew, talk about the training process and perhaps some of the materials and information that you leave with.
Great. Thanks, Allison. Yeah, like Allison said, I just completed facilitator training it's about a month ago. Really, really interesting and knowledgeable program. I definitely feel well prepared to lead a group coming out of it. I want to start off by saying that although I'm a student of psychology, I'm an applied behavioral analysis major. I'm in no way an expert. I'm not yet board certified. But the very cool thing about this program is that you don't have to be certified to be a facilitator. It helps to understand the principles of cognitive behavioral therapy, but you don't have to be an expert to be a facilitator. The core principle of the program is that thinking controls behavior. As Doc said, that's the essence of cognitive behavioral therapy. Behavior doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It's associated with a long chain of cognitive processes that precede it. So, in the facilitator training, we're taught about the social skills that people need in their daily lives. The folks that come into the program as group members are often very ill-equipped to start off with their social skills. They've learned from, the role models that they had, which often modeled, pretty unhealthy behavior for them to then, become an adult with. So the program, teaches the group members new skills, new social skills to use. These are productive skills that are positive for everyone in the end. Some of them are active listening, not just hearing, but really, doing all the things that, are required of active listening, and understanding one's own feelings. Of course, we're also, taught to understand other people's feelings, as any conflict or communication is not just a one-person activity. It's necessary to also understand the other person's possible thoughts and feelings, which is a really important thing to teach. Empathy is not something that everybody is equipped with. So that's another thing that the program does. With the new understanding of human cognition, group members will then learn to practice the problem-solving skills. Like Doc said, there's a whole series, 6 actual series of problem-solving skills, each with multiple steps. It's very interesting because, we start at the very beginning and teach the simplest step, simplest skill, and then move on. Each next step includes the previous ones. So you start very simple and then end up, at a very, fairly complex problem-solving skill. The steps are practiced and repracticed. The whole idea is to get the men and women who are in the program ready so that when they get in the actual situation, they're already equipped with the tools. They know exactly where to go. It's not just throwing a bunch of knowledge at them. They go through and really practice it. It's like an artist or an athlete or a musician learning that muscle memory so that when they're faced with a challenge, they've got it ready to go. The idea is to help the group members learn how to slow their cognition and stop before they act, right? That behavioral chain is it's an apt metaphor because, each cognitive process is one chain, is one link in that chain. So if we can get that chain separated, they don't get to the end result, which is not the behavior, but the consequence, really. So that's the great thing about it. Another really interesting thing about the program to me is that it's really indicative of the truly scientific nature of modern psychology. Much like an engineer who writes an auto mechanics manual, right? That the layperson can take and use to fix their car. The National Institute of Corrections has made this program for us that we can then use, and just following it step by step. Of course, you have to be knowledgeable about the program and and ready to read through it and to be active in it. But as long as a person follows that manual step by step, it prepares a facilitator to lead group members to a successful end. There's a lot of modeling and role playing, which is super effective. Again, it's that practice and repractice thing where, as the facilitator, we're expected to first model the behavior We get up and show the group members that, a lot of who are uncomfortable with the idea of, acting in front of their peers. But it's an important thing to do, to show them that, hey, look, if I can do it, and not be an entire fool, you can also get up here and do this, and that's what's necessary. But most importantly, the program is really grounded in realism. It's not termed with lofty words and vocabulary. It's we don't really talk so much about cognition as we talk about thinking and feeling. And those are the things that your average man and woman who's in the institution or coming out of an institution can really grasp onto, and that's who it's designed for. It's designed for just your average person who's had a life of trouble and doesn't want to be in that trouble anymore.
Well, I don't think that could have been put any better, Andrew. Thank you so much.
We can go now, right?
I'm sorry. I hope I didn't
Thank you for coming, everyone. Now we're going to go to Lisa Morgan. Now, she said she is with the Adult Parole Authority, and she is not only a facilitator, but trained to train other individuals to facilitate. So, Lisa, I'd like to ask you if you can kind of talk about some of the main components of the group and the sessions.
Like Allison mentioned, Doc and I were both trained by the National Institute of Corrections to be facilitators of this program. We follow the program by the book. We do it exactly as it was written, exactly how we were trained to do it. There are 25 lessons in the Thinking for a Change program, and those are kind of broken down into three main components. So like Andrew mentioned, there are social skills, there's cognitive self-change, and then problem solving. So those are kind of the three main components broken up into 25 lessons. We do have 2 facilitators at each session because there is a lot of activity. Like Andrew mentioned, there's a lot of modeling and role play. There's a lot going on during these sessions. So 2 facilitators is important to us. We schedule groups either 1 time or 2 times a week, and each class is going to last no longer than 2 hours, probably 1.5 to 2 hours. That way everybody gets a chance to practice the skill that we're learning that day. And each group is going to have about 8 to 12 participants. It's a fairly small group process. So everybody's able to get some input and feedback from the other group members, but it's not so many people that it's overwhelming and takes too long.
Okay, great. So there are 3 components, social skills, cognitive self-change, and problem solving, correct? Correct. Okay. Can you kind of walk us through how a lesson might go for each of those components, please?
Sure. We start out with some of the very basic social skills. So for a lot of people, this might just be a reminder or a practice. For some people, even the basic social skills are kind of new. So we start with things like active listening, asking questions, giving feedback, things that will be helpful to the group members just in participating in a group process. The social skills lessons all kind of follow the same format, and it's based in social learning theory. So like Andrew mentioned, the facilitators, we're going to model the skill for them. We're going to show them how each skill is done, and we really break it down very slowly. So, for example, the skill of listening might have 4 or 5 specific steps that we show them, very slowly and deliberately, breaking down the process of listening. So we model it for them, and then everybody in the group has the chance to practice that skill. So they think of a time when it might be important for them to listen to somebody, their mother, their spouse, their parole officer. And we kind of set up a scenario where they can practice the skill in that safe environment in the group setting. They practice the skill, they get some feedback from the other group members and from the facilitators. And then there's homework. And the homework is to go out into their life and practice the skill again. So kind of progressively, putting it into more difficult situations where they can learn these skills. Later on in the curriculum, there's more difficult social skills as well. So things like understanding your own feelings, understanding other people's feelings, negotiating, dealing with people who are angry. So a lot of skills that can really help people, get along with people in the community. The next component that we come up to is cognitive self-change. There are 3 steps to cognitive self-change. So we break it down into several lessons where first we just get the group members to really practice paying attention to their thinking. So kind of stopping and figuring out what's going on in my mind, what am I feeling, and what are my beliefs and attitudes. The second step of cognitive self-change is to recognize risk. So we do another whole lesson on just once we've been able to identify our feelings or our thoughts, do those have any risk for me? Will these maybe lead me to do something to make a problem worse or to make a situation more difficult for me? We follow that with finding new thinking. So once we're able to help that person identify risky thinking, and often they're able to identify a pattern of similar risky thinking or risky feelings that they've experienced throughout their lives, then we help them come up with new thinking that might be helpful for them so they don't make a problem worse or do something to get in trouble. Oftentimes, for the clients that we're working with in the Adult Parole Authority, the new thinking can be as simple as, I don't want to do anything to go back to jail. But that's going to be different for each participant. And again, with those lessons, we're always going to model for them how to do the skill, give them an opportunity to practice it in the class, and then practice with homework in their real life as well. Some of the tools that we teach them in this component to be able to do these 3 steps of cognitive self-change are thinking reports and thinking check-ins. So identifying thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and attitudes and putting them on paper in a thinking report to help them identify the thoughts that might lead up to a risky behavior, and then also giving them the skills to do that kind of on the spot, just in their head without putting things on paper with the idea of a thinking check-in. The third component, problem solving, like Andrew mentioned, there's 6 skills, 6 problem-solving skills. We give each skill its own lesson. So we again break it down very slowly, step by step, starting with stop and think, going all the way through to make a plan. The curriculum does a really nice job of teaching the steps one at a time and then also building in practice. So there's 2 lessons that are solely devoted to more practice of putting those skills into use. We found this section to be particularly cool with a lot of the clients we work with. They're really choosing to practice these skills with real problems that are going on with their lives. So they're able to work with something that they're dealing with, put it on paper, get feedback from the group, and really be able to work through a problem from beginning to end. The group ends with the last lesson that they do is a group lesson where they take a problem and as a group kind of come up with a role play together to practice all the 6 steps of problem solving again. So it's really cool. In that last lesson, they kind of get to become the facilitators and work through the skills of problem solving together.
Great. Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks.
Many of you may have noticed Lisa doing this. For those of us that are trained, have been through the facilitation, that means a lot to us. So I don't mean to put you guys on the spot, but Dr. Ola and Lisa, I'm going to ask you guys to do a think aloud for everybody so they know.
Sure. A lot of the steps that we're talking about, the social skills, are all broken down into different steps, and some of those steps are action steps. So if I'm watching a person while I'm listening to them, you can see that I'm doing that. But if I'm thinking about what the other person is saying, you don't really know that I'm doing that unless in the group I show you my thoughts out loud. So this is kind of what we use in the groups to state our thoughts out loud.
And how would that look? Can you and Dr. Ola?
Demonstrate.
I have to tell you what I'm thinking?
No, just you guys do the training together so much, so I thought maybe you could just pick one out of a training that you guys kind of do.
Oh, gosh.
So how do you show the guys?
The steps of... Which one did we do the other day? You're going to Michigan?
Sure.
Okay. So,
Hey, what's up, Lisa?
not much. How's it going?
Man, I'm all excited. I'm going to Michigan,
Yeah.
going fishing this weekend.
Oh, Michigan. Does your parole officer know?
I'll just be gone for the weekend. It's no big deal.
I don't know if this is a good idea. I really don't want to see him get in trouble. I think I'm going to give him some feedback about this. I should tell him I really don't think this is a good idea. I'll have to do it now, and I'll tell him right here. You know, I don't think that's a good idea. You know, I'd hate to see you get in trouble for, you know, just for a fishing trip. So that's an example of the model that we would show for the skill of giving feedback.
And again, very simple, very basic, so that the participants can catch on to it. However, like you say, when we practice the think alouds, they are really life situations,
Yeah.
actual things that we encounter. Folks tend to fall back on family situations. I've got to tell my mom I'm going back to prison, or something's happening with the family. I've got to address so-and-so. So we really use the think alouds. And quite honestly, after I was done with the training and my good friend Wesley, I still walk around like this a lot of times, thinking aloud before I say something. I think to myself, and then we say it out loud. So you don't actually say it out loud.
Right.
You're thinking to yourself. You're processing what you're going to say, and then you actually say it to the individual. So it allows you some time to think about what you're going to say before you actually say it.
And we always remind our participants, you only have to do this in group. If you do it at home...
What is he doing?
I do it in the car. I do it in the car a lot. All right.
You know, that one is a good example of kind of one of the basic premises that, you know, we explain that giving feedback is not the same as giving crap. That, you know, people are generally good. If someone says something, you right away say, that's ridiculous, that's stupid. But to give them a chance to stop and think and come up with different ways to give that feedback, to kind of sort through and not just react to the immediate emotion, but to come up with a way to say it that could be most constructive and helpful.
And that is an example of the lesson we did with a group of men yesterday. And once we did that model, you know, we asked, well, what's a situation where you could give somebody feedback? And the one guy raises his hand and he says, well, I've got something that just happened yesterday. And his role play was giving me feedback about the outgoing message on my work phone being outdated. So I thought that was really cool that he took, you know, something that he really wanted to give somebody feedback about. And they choose things as difficult as, you know, giving their boss feedback when they think they're being overlooked for overtime. You know, they picked some really difficult situations that were real to them.
Perhaps, you know, the one I was most moved by was a fellow who wanted to give feedback to his nephew, that his nephew had been getting into trouble, and he was concerned that he was going to be going down the wrong path. And it's like, it's an awkward thing. He doesn't have a lot of credibility himself, but he wants to, like, still have that positive impact. So practicing how to give his nephew that feedback was very important to him. It was just great to help him with that.
Yeah. And the way the lessons are structured, then, that becomes his homework. So hopefully he will go out and give his nephew that feedback and then be able to report back to the rest of the group and let us know how that went.
And have you updated your voicemail?
I did it right away.
Okay.
Right after group, I did.
Go ahead, Doctor.
I just want to say that when you mentioned giving feedback, I've done that, but a real shortened version for me to teach young men as well as grown men feedback is keeping your intellect over your emotions.
Sure.
If you put your emotion over your intellect, then it's not feedback, then it's criticism. And they understand that. It's real short, but I over E or E over I, that's kind of a cue for them when they get ready to get the feedback. So I appreciate what you said about that.
I like that point, too, because written into the steps of the skill is provide objective information to the other person. And our group said, well, what exactly does that mean?
Right.
So we were able to talk about, you know, the facts, the information without the emotion.
Without the emotions.
Yeah.
Like,
Because once you say something, you can't take it back.
Feedback can become complaining,
Can be complaining.
if they're
Or
not
criticism.
following the steps correctly.
Absolutely,
Sure.
absolutely.
Well, Mr. Pullen, since you've just spoken.
She picked me. Why would she pick me? Is it my turn to talk
It's my
already?
turn to
Why is she
pick on
picking
you.
me? You know,
Yes, it is.
and we do that a lot because I know for me it helps me before I speak. I don't want to say anything that's critical of hurting anybody's feelings. So your question to me, you didn't.
Feelings? Is
I
that
hurt
where
your
we're going?
feelings,
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Wes, if you could, let's talk about, before we get to Dr. Dodley, and we are lucky enough to have a graduate of the Thinking for a Change in our audience, so I'm going to ask him to come up and speak for a bit as well. Can you talk a little bit about the target populations in which CBT is being utilized, and then I think we'll have Ernest, if it's okay with Ernest, come up to the podium and talk a little bit about, actually, you know what, we'll do Dr. Dodley first, Ernest, and then we'll get to you, okay?
Okay, so real quick, so obviously this is a panel of those who work with the penal system. So the population that is most likely to benefit from CBT are our offender population. That's correct, Doctor. I want to be correct when I say that. And resilience works with offenders as well. So I've seen several young men, including Mr. Crane, come through the cognitive behavior program in the institution. Now that's 24 sessions in the institution, right?
24. The 25th one is kind of the graduation
right,
and
graduation
celebration.
piece, right? So that is 4 to 6 months at any given time, and that's really intense. They learn a lot about, you know, what Ernest was saying and what Lisa was saying earlier, but I think they go into a whole lot more detail as far as behavior and thinking. So, and it's because the prison population has a lot more challenges than, I guess, your average Joe Blow, you know, so there's a lot more to deal with while you're in an institution. So a lot of men who have come through the program have been successful and have came out and lived productive lives, made better decisions than they were prior to them entering the institution. And it just seems to be something that not just this population, the offender population, but all of us can benefit from. You know, I know for me, we were talking about the Think Aloud, and sometimes I want to, you know, provide feedback, but sometimes it does turn into criticism because I put my emotions over top of my intellect. So I like what the doctor said about that, and that's something to think about. You know, and it's, I think we would all probably be better off if we just kind of take 5, 10, 15 seconds before we speak, you know, because again, I can't take words back. Once it's out there, it's out there, you know. So again, it's something that everyone can benefit from. I mean, I know when I went through the training, I came out on 4 days a different man. I was a totally different human being. I mean, I learned more about myself in 4 days, and I'm 46 years old, than I ever have. I mean, it was that intense. So and I still use a lot of what I've learned through CBT in my own personal walk, you know, as Ernest does, and I think as we all do. It's something that I think cannot be helped. You know, it's just a growing mechanism. So everyone can benefit from this. I don't think one certain population is more adapt to benefit from others. We all have issues, no matter if they're dealing with our family members, our colleagues at work, you know, our children, our loved ones, I mean, whomever. Things always come to the surface. I know we all say things that we don't mean. So the answer is targeted to the penal system, but we all can benefit from it in one way or another.
Do you mind if I add to that as
Please
well?
do.
Inside the prison system, we do have a specific population of clients that we focus this group on. You know, for the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction, which is, you know, we're part of that. The Adult Parole Authority is part of DRC. You know, there's inmates who are first-time offenders. There's inmates who have, you know, 8 prison numbers in their past. Our goal as a department is to reduce recidivism. There's research that shows that this program over many, many years has been effective, has been able to help people not go back to jail or prison. We tend to focus programs such as this on our higher risk offenders. If we want to reduce recidivism, we need to target our efforts on the people who are most likely to go back to prison. We have done the program for lower risk offenders, but we're very careful to keep those populations separate. So most of who we target are moderate to high risk clients.
And hopefully by that time that this man who has 6, 8 numbers, we get to class, he's ready to change. I mean, that's the whole goal, right? So, and I've witnessed that too. Guys, they're tired. They're 45, 50 years old. They've been here 4, 5, 6, 7 times, and they're just tired. You know, so I agree with that, Lisa.
What do you mean by a number?
A prison number, how many times they've been to prison.
Okay, so how many times they've been to prison is what the number refers to. Okay. Anything else, or Dr. Dodley, are you ready?
Stand back.
Always ready. Huh?
Well, let
So
me say
we've
this.
got Dr. Dodley, again, introduced himself, but focuses the Thinking for a Change or the cognitive behavioral therapy. I've invited him here to speak in regards to how it's being utilized within our youth population. So if you would, please.
Yeah, let me say this, that I don't think that you can take one discipline and solve all the problems. I think that there's a way you have to integrate your life and your experiences and even how you approach folks into what you're doing. For example, I think that it's important to know the effects of all the negative isms on our young people, period. Whether being covert or overt, they're all affected by racism, sexism, and adultism, all that kind of stuff. Well, the whole idea is to make them trust each other first so they can talk. The very first thing I like for young people to do is be able to trust each other in a group. In fact, the first thing I do is actually have a trust scale from 1 to 10, and I'll ask the boys in the group or young ladies, and it's best to do it with gender groups. Because when you do gender groups, the boys can really focus on things they really want to talk about, and girls the same way. But the point I'm trying to make is that trust scale, I ask them up front, is it important to trust? So if I get a unanimous decision, say yes. So on the trust scale from 1 to 10, I'll ask a group of 15 young men, how many of you trust everybody in the room? Meaning that you can cry in front of them, you can talk about all your pain, you can talk about how it feels not having a dad or whatever. So I'm getting it on 10s. It's usually clustered around 3 and 4, and sometimes one boy said, can you put a 0 up there? All right. And by the time I finish with them, and I tell them, as an elder, not an older, if I haven't reduced this trust level to at least an 8, I haven't done my job, period. And I put it right back on them and back on me. Now, the whole thing about this is that I have a philosophy that it's important to rescue their gifts that they're born with. Rescue it, release their potential, and restore the promise that was given to them. I also remind them about a man by the name of Gail Brown. I got boys reading the book called The Prophet. That you don't belong to your parents. You are God's gift. And that's important for me to find out. Or God or a higher power. Do you believe that you are a God's gift? And they'll raise their hands like this. When I tell them that, it's because they all are born with a purpose. Now, there are a lot of people I work with who don't know what their purpose is. So I think it's important to start at grass level. In other words, my philosophy is that it's better to build children than to repair adults. If we could do that, then we wouldn't have this necessarily. Now, I also remind the kids that when we're going through our program, we might relapse. They say, what does relapse mean? So you got to be real careful that you don't, if you say something, you have to explain it. Make sure they know what it's all about. I think it's important in this field to know something about substance abuse, especially how it affects you directly and indirectly. I think it's important to know this whole thing about bullying, that it's just a symptom. What is a symptom? It's the cause of something. So we go deeper. And I'll tell kids, how many of you know what a foundation is? I know what it is, and you build it. I don't know. You think, I said, but listen, we're going to go beyond the foundation. We're going to go in that footer. Then one boy said, well, my grandpa told me what a footer was. So sometimes these kids teach themselves and don't know they're doing it. So this is why it's important, I think, to have someone who can listen. The curriculum is fine, but sometimes you can't hit it right there because you got to be where they are and bring out a point. I think that this whole thing about rites of passage is very important. I wrap it around that. Rites of passage are those agreed upon steps that a young man, a young woman should have in order to be a responsible citizen. And I put it in 4 different areas. Now, remind you this. These areas are still under thinking for a change because they don't know anything about rites of passage at all. Like I tell them, first of all, it's important to know survival skills. And cognitive behavior addresses that very nicely. It's important to know about spirituality. Whether you call God, whatever you call your higher power, there's something greater than you. It's also important for them to understand how the community could be in favor of you or can help you or hinder you. And last but not least, it's important to know your ancestors. Now, the reason I'm saying that, because we do a ritual, and rituals are important. You think about rituals of thinking for a change. One ritual we do is called libations, or tambiko in Swahili. These kids need to know that their ancestors didn't bring them this far to put them down now. Every ancestor. I mean, every culture is in that room, because sometimes I may have kids there who are Hispanic, and they relate very well. We have some kids there who are European Americans. But what I'm trying to tell them, that we have to know about each other. And there are myths about each other, and those are called thinking errors. If I list people in our country on a board who have no power in this country, for example, or less power, let's say poor people, people who are disabled, people who are of color, whatever it is, and I ask them to talk about experience that you had been on that side of what we call a power chart. And you'd be surprised all the emotions that comes out when we do this. I like using rational emotive therapy with our boys and girls. They know what that means. In other words, I always tell them, you got to know your ABCs. I know my ABCs, so let me see if you do. The activating event, the belief system, the consequences, and your behavior. So you got to slow that down a little bit. It's interesting, too, of course, we all do. I know last minute research, I was looking at some stuff. And this is one of the therapies that is evidence-based that show that it works. Not too many therapies show that it works. This one you can measure, because you can measure behavior, you can measure changes, you can measure a lot of different things with this particular program. I like it because it fits under everything that I believe in. I believe that it still takes a village. We all have to do this. Because when you work with these kids, you got to work with family members too. You know, well, I don't know what would happen to a young man if he went home and told Mom, you have to keep your eye on your E. And I get a call back, what does that mean? Then I'm counseling mom or dad at the same time. So it's a family disease. If you don't believe it, hyphenate disease, and you get a disease. So I guess I'll stop for a moment, but I do like working with young people first. But I'm also working with reentry programs. And these, when I look at them, they look like little boys all over again. Especially when we do, I like to use the Johari window as one of the vehicles. Everybody does it in the class. When you get up, present your window, and I'll explain that in a moment what it is. The whole group is saying, oh, you're not that open, or you're more open than you think that you are. And your subconscious, you know, why is that so big? Why is your blind side big as it is? Because I see you as whatever. So in other words, the open side of your personality is what you know about the person, not how much they talk. People think open means how much you talk. No, it's how much I know about you. The blind side is what you can see that everybody else can see. And sometimes that's good stuff. But we deny that. The third portion of it is called the, I want to say the last, but it's your subconscious. And the way I define it are those things that you think about, see, smell, taste, or hear, that bring back a bad memory for you. And you'd be surprised. And I'll ask them, for example, think of a song. Think of anything. I had a young boy the other day, when we do our check-in, I'll tell you about that in a moment. He said that I have a check-in scale. A check-in scale meaning that how you feel physically and how you feel emotionally on a Likert scale of 5. So if you're 5'5", you're in good shape. But if you tell me you're 5'1" or 3'1" or something like this, I'll stop. I got 3'1" the other day. And so he didn't want to say what it was. But when he checked in, he said, because I had to sleep in the bathtub last night. Well, I asked the teacher. I did some teacher in-service training. I said, why would a boy have to sleep in the bathroom? Or any student? Well, because there's no room. That's logical. Because he's scared? That's logical. The answer is that a bullet won't go through porcelain. So we got a lot to deal with these kids. And this whole thing about cognitive-based therapy, it's excellent because it's on them. It's working from inside out. We do so much of outside-in therapy, it's terrible. I'm threatening you because you might go to jail. No. We got a little thing going on now. I ask kids, if you're walking in a mall and what's that shoe place that sells these tennis shoes?
Foot Locker.
Foot Locker. If Foot Locker was you walk through there, and it was completely dark, and you pushed the door and it was open, and nobody around, would you go in there? Half of them raise their hand and say, no, I wouldn't. Like that. Another guy say something like, well, how come you wouldn't go? Because I don't want to get caught. The one young man said, you know what? I wouldn't go because it's not the right thing to do. What do you mean by that? You're a sissy. No, I'm thinking about my grandmother and what she would say. So we plant that in their mind to have someone who's their mantra. We don't use that term, but someone who you can think about that makes you smile. Okay? And I'm writing a book called Emotional Pillows, and it's going into that. Because when you have thoughts, that can change your behavior. So anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that I really believe that it's important that these kids get in touch with who they are, even if you have to do it culturally. Like I use the term Sankofa. We don't write the passage. Sankofa means go back and fetch it. And it's a symbol that matches that. I got some young men now who are on the Sankofa level, which means that they got a little thing that they wear. It's a bird with his neck bent backwards, but he's looking the opposite direction. It's a metaphor. Our kids do very well with metaphors, constantly. With the whole rap craze. I mean, you could take one lyric, and that means a whole lot. So I try to blend in what they know, what they're going on. This whole thing about thinking, we were talking about relationships. And there's a song I think Beyonce has out that good boys, bad boys are bad for you, but good boys are boring.
That's Mary J. Blige.
Mary J. Blige. Okay, I know. So anyway, how do you know that? Anyway,
she knows.
She knows it. But I'm saying that they need to have things that trigger their thoughts about what the right thing to do. Then I remind them, I know I'm saying a lot, that there's a model for change. You first have to be aware what it is you want to change. Then you explore. You make a commitment, develop the skill, refine it, we internalize it, then there's change. There's nobody go from awareness to change unless I got a gun on you. And then that's superficial. So the whole idea is the small, intricate steps. And I really believe this. I think that the kids you work with, anybody you work, got to trust you. You got to be self-disclosing yourself, not too much, but just to let them know that you also are still learning.
I'm just so glad to hear of you doing this work with the young people. One of the things that's most heartening to us is that we have guys, almost everyone who comes in through the Adult Parole Authority to this program is forced to be there. They don't want to be there. We start off wading through a lot of complaining. It's not fair. I did my time. But at the end, what we hear often is, I wish someone would have taught me this in high school. I wish I would have got this program after my first number. I wish I would have learned this as a child. It would have saved me a lot of heartache. So that's awesome to be taking that to the young people.
Thank you.
Anybody else on the panel have any feedback from Dr. Dodley?
Just let us, man. I just want to say this. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to do this work. I mean, young people are not easy to work with.
No, they're not. But you know what? I believe that it takes us.
Better old folks.
But see, I think it's not so much age as it is an attitude. I use the term elder very carefully because you can have two individuals who are 50 years old in rites of passage with our model. You have to be at least 50 to be an elder. Now, you have olders and elders, and I asked the kid what the difference is. They said, well, they're both old. I said, yeah, but what's the difference? One of them, and every now and then, I want them to think about it. I don't want to just tell them. And I asked them, how many of you know somebody who you can talk to sometime that's real old? They raise their hand. And I tell them, I have on my statue an old man with a drum, with a stool. And he walked with that little stool so that he can sit down on your level and talk to you. Olders get all they can. They sit on the can, so you can't get none of it. But olders keep on running their mouth all the time. And so they know elders. There's a big difference in the elders. There's some olders, every time I go to Kroger's, the store, I see it's about my age. When are you going to retire? See, that's not even my vernacular. Right. Retirement is a term for industry. And this is an industry that's going to be going all the time. The commodities are our kids. How can I retire? So, anyway.
Couple questions I'm fielding from the audience. First would be for you, Dr. Ola. How long has cognitive behavioral therapy been in existence?
Well, that's a good question. The first identified cognitive behavioral treatment was Aaron Beck at the University of Pennsylvania. This is back in the 1950s. It was cognitive therapy for depression. People noticed that folks who were depressed tended to have commonalities in their thinking, negative views of themselves, the world, and the future. But really, I think back to the first century, there's evidence that this premise was there, that thinking controls behavior. Romans 12:2, Paul writes, do not be conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And that translates pretty directly to us. Do not be conformed to the criminogenic lifestyle and patterns of behavior you've learned and developed, but be transformed or changed by the renewing or the changing of your mind, by changing the way you think. And to me, that's the heart of it. It's been around for a long time.
And anybody on the panel, criminogenic, can somebody define criminogenic for the audience?
I know that my spell check always says it's not a real word.
Right.
But basically,
Criminogenic needs.
Criminal behavior, attitudes, thinking.
Environment,
Yeah.
surroundings.
When
the
we
people
talk
that
about
you
criminogenic needs, it's like, what are the things that need to be addressed
Right.
that kind of perpetuate someone having like the behaviors that leave them as a criminal? So the criminogenic needs is what needs to be addressed to help person escape the kind of patterns that they're locked into.
Okay, great.
You know, and I'm glad we got away from that term, kind of, because there was also some theories. Lombrazzo, got this name, Lombrazzo, that you could tell a criminal by how they look. Centimeters of the eyes, and if you didn't have a little fatty part on your earlobe, then you're subject, because what they're sampling they use for people who are in prison. And a lot of those guys didn't have the little fat part. So if you had a little fat part, they look at your nose. Oh, that's one of the traits. So I'm saying that there was a lot of old theories about what makes up a criminal. Not only their behavior, but how they look. Eyes, ears, and something else. Oh, and complexion. Okay.
Yeah.
That's still hanging on. Yeah.
And I, all we're talking about is based on behavior. And I think if we had loved ones who understood when a man goes to prison and all he endures, and when he keeps repeating his behavior and the same crime, he's back and forth, in and out, that covers all this. I mean, there's something to that. It's not like he's just doing this because he likes the food. I mean, there's something always deeper, and CBT wants to get to the root of what's going on with the individual. And like Dr. said, it's proven to work. It's proven to be effective. And I think Ernest is a perfect example.
Well, and I was going to use that as a segue. Ernest,
Yes.
do you mind if I pick on you? Would you come talk to the audience a little bit about your experience in the 25 sessions and kind of how you're utilizing that on a day-to-day basis? Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Very proud of
Welcome,
young man.
Ernest
Very
Frank.
proud of him.
Thank you. My name's Ernest Crank. I'm 40 years old. I actually partook in a residential drug treatment program in federal prison. Our program was a 500-hour, 9-month program. And the foundation of that program was CBT and changing our thinking process. And I got to tell you, change is not easy. I was very resistant. I partook in the program the last 9 months of a 12-year, 8-month prison sentence, and I wasn't very open to change at that point. However, probably 4 months into the program, I started seeing it make a real difference in my life. It made a real difference in how I communicated with others. It made a real difference in how I communicated with my family. And when I started seeing my loved ones notice a difference in me, I felt like it was worth it.
Make you more comfortable.
Okay.
There you go.
Thank you. It was it was a great experience. You know, doing my reentry, it's benefited me greatly. I think Dr. Dolly talked about it, what we called rational self-analyzation, or RSA, is where we actually take an activating event and try to make it more rational. We get rid of a lot of the emotion in the event and talk about, you know, what would that event show if a camera took a snapshot of it? You know, took all of our emotions or all of our conditioned thinking out of it. From there, we go into our beliefs. We have to challenge those beliefs, attempt to make those more rational. There's 5 rules of rational thinking. I can't remember all 5 of them, but the one that sticks out to me, you know, is your attitude, belief, or thought based on objective reality. Is it helping you to feel the way you want to feel without the use of substances, illegal substances? Is it keeping you out of conflict with others? These are, you know, some of the questions you should ask yourself when you find yourself having a negative attitude, belief, or thought that's not letting you feel the way you want to feel. The RSA was probably for me personally, it was the biggest tool that I received while I was in the program, because, and I think Mr. Davis hit this, is it allows you to slow down. You know, we're not born criminals, you know. Sometimes our conditions affect our cognitions affect our choices. And if we don't learn how to deal with those in a rational and responsible and accountable manner, then we're just going to keep repeating them. And that's sort of what I did, you know. The program helped me to slow down and think about those things. Definitely to have empathy for others, to think about how my actions affected others. And it allowed me to really see that I was capable of making better decisions once I learned how to make better decisions. So the program has been invaluable to me. Since I've got out of prison, you know, I've been fortunate. I've worked hard. I've got a job. I remain employed. It's been very important for me to have a productive circle around me. By surrounding myself with people that truly care about me, will not be afraid or intimidated to give me that positive feedback, to tell me what's right and what's wrong, and it's all helped greatly.
Thank you.
Ernest,
Yes.
how long have you been home?
I'll be home a year come June.
That's what I'm impressed with. That's what I'm most impressed with. So you've taken the tools that you learned through your CBT, you applied it to your life since you've been home. You're employed, you have your own place to stay, you have transportation, right?
Yes.
So your basic needs are met, correct?
Yes.
All right. All right. That's all I want to hear, buddy. Thank you, man.
Okay. I have a question. I really like what you said, and I think that kids need to look up to other grown men. You're a nation builder.
Absolutely.
You know, in drug and alcohol addiction, some of us go to relapse therapy. You know, you can relapse a lot of different ways. Is there anything that you're building for yourself to keep you from relapsing in that old thinking?
Behavior.
What are you doing?
I mean, it happens. I find myself relapsing a lot of times, and not necessarily from a substance abuse standpoint,
Sure.
but from a thinking standpoint, a negative thinking standpoint. It's a challenge every day to not feel entitled to something.
Good.
You know, it's a challenge every day to not feel self-pity for having spent more than a decade in prison.
Right.
You know.
Yes, sir.
It's also a reward for these things. It's also a reward for being able to combat that negative thinking and now have the tools to do so. You know, to not feel like things can become so overwhelming that there's absolutely nothing you can do about them. And that's not the case.
Let me ask you this. Do you keep a journal?
I do.
Good. Are you talking to young people?
I haven't quite gotten there yet, but
you will be.
I would like to.
Yeah, okay. That's all I want to know. Because that'll help you Because
Absolutely.
you've given it, you got to give it back.
Definitely.
And I like what the doc said about as far as your therapy, your personal therapy. What can you do for yourself daily to stay above board? And that is one of the best things. Just give back, to young people.
Definitely.
Thank
you.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
As well, we're lucky enough to have in the audience Miss Shauna Hinton. She actually resides in my program. I run a reentry stabilization program. She has been through Dr. Dodley's class at Impact. At Impact, they have a program, once you've gotten out of prison, they have a reentry program that Dr. Dodley runs. And upon completion of that, there is an employment or job coaching program. So I have asked Shauna to take a few minutes and share with you her experiences with Dr. Dodley and the Johari window.
Good afternoon, everybody, panelists and guests. My name's Shauna Hinton, and I'm familiar with a couple of the panelists. I'm a second-time offender. I just came home. It'll be 6 months, April 24th. When I came home, I didn't really have a clue to what I was going to do. So Miss Allison had took me to Impact. That's where I met Dr. Dodley. And in the reentry program, as far as the Johari window, it gives you a better understanding of yourself. Like, I don't know about everybody else, but I always thought, like, well, I know myself. I've been the same person for all these years. But I didn't really know myself until I did the Johari window. And it gave me a chance to kind of share basically about myself with strangers, complete strangers. Like, when I first walked into the class, I was like, I'm not talking to these people. I don't know none of them. They look crazy. But as that was on a Monday, by Friday, like, the trust level in the class on the Monday was at a 10. Nobody trusted nobody, nothing. By Thursday, the trust level in the class was at a 3, where everybody felt comfortable. We were exchanging telephone numbers. We were going out to lunch. And by the second week, when we all started Johari window, it kind of just gives you a chance to kind of share your barriers or your burdens that are harboring you, or stuff that you haven't really been able to talk about with other people, or just stuff that might have happened in your past, or stuff that you feel is going on in your present, or maybe even in your future. And it's like a positive feedback, and nobody's judging you for being the person that you are. So I was really thankful for being able to come home a week and get into the program, because it's kind of like a hard program to get into. And as of today, I still go back to my notes from the class that we took. I still use my books and just kind of put it in my everyday life, so I can be a better person in society, plus also a better mother.
Okay. I'm going to open this up to the panel, just at large. And I was suggested that I ask this. So what do you guys, as experts, what are some of the advantages to cognitive behavioral therapy, and how do you think it's different from some more traditional approaches?
Well, I think one of the main advantages is it is sellable and usable. Up front, we explain that the goal of this program is to help you have more control of your life. We acknowledge that they are probably sick and tired of the adult parole authority. They don't want to be there. Our goal is the same, that we're not going to be a part of their life. That by learning how to stop and think, to not react to ways they have traditionally reacted, they will give themselves more control over their lives so other people don't exert control. We explain that at any given day, the workhouse is full of guys who, in the moment, felt righteous, justified, or like they were doing the only thing they could do at that moment. They get jammed up, and then it's like, oh man, what was I thinking? This is to give them the tools, the skills to stop and think, to not react to the emotions, as we were talking earlier, but to instead make a choice how you want to react, so that the control of their life becomes theirs. and it's not the authorities exerting control.
I completely agree with Doc. I think that it's most valuable because it's proactive as opposed to reactive. Equipping folks with these tools is a really good metaphor, because it's like you've got an empty toolbox where, you know, all that's in it is your fist, you know, your knife, your gun, and that's what a lot of people growing up understand. That those are their only resources when push comes to shove is violence. This program in cognitive behavioral therapy in general teaches those tools that the people leave with, the group members leave with, and they carry them with them for the rest of their lives, so that when they get into a conflict situation, or even just any communication in general, they know how to handle themselves, so they don't get into a place they don't want to be. They can stop that at the very beginning, and you know, the CBT offers them those tools.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Specifically with the Thinking for a Change program, I think Dr. Dodley earlier said, you know, we're having them work from the inside. We're not working from the outside. They're doing the work themselves. You know, one guy in a group said, "So you're going to tell me how to think?" No, I'm not. You're going to tell you how to think. They do a lot of brainstorming where they can come up with their own ideas. They can get feedback or input from other group members, and then they choose what works for them. You know, it's not us just telling them what to do. We're only there to facilitate the activities. They're really doing the work.
And even in an institution, I know once you go through the program, Ernest, you can help me out with this, the inmates become facilitators as well. You guys are a peer-to-peer mentoring piece. It's kind of like a therapeutic community when you teach each other. And that, to me, is the most impactful teaching, when your peers, it's not like we're standing up here telling you what to do. Your peers are being examples of, you know, especially if you've been through the program, you know, what works for them. And then I relate to that a little more than someone standing there telling me or showing me how to think, you know what I mean? So it gets to a point where, you know, it's peer-to-peer contact. So to me, that is the most impactful thing, because I know, you know, like I said, I went through the program, and it changed the way I thought about a lot of things, you know.
One advantage for me is that I learn something every time I do it about me and what I need to improve upon. When one young man, last time we we done windows, which actually was yesterday, he said procrastination was one of his blind spots. And I try to duck, because that's one of mine as well. So one advantage of the program, you get a chance to reflect on you. Also, I really believe in those, the Search Institute, like 10 years ago, 10 years ago, we developed a program called 40 Developmental Assets. And out of those 40 assets, no one has all 40, but there's 20 internal assets and 20 external assets. The more assets you have, the less likely you deal in negative behavior. So it's this whole thing about the cognitive behavior model blends in real well with the internal assets. I rather focus on those than the external assets. The external assets just being feeling safe and home, the physical stuff. But good self-esteem, know who you really are. Then you can tie in, quote, what we call the Naguda Saba principles with this. All the stuff blends in. I don't want them kids to see this stuff as being isolated. I like it because it's just a way of life that we're retrieving it and giving it back to you. It's already yours. So that's what I like about it. Plus, you have to teach it. I don't even call it teaching it. You have to demonstrate it with your mouth, your head, and your heart, because they can spot a phony in a moment. So it keeps me honest all the time. That's my advantage in working with it.
Go ahead. You know what? We'll hold for questions, because I'm going to need people to come to the microphone, actually. So,
One quick comment.
Go ahead.
Shay Tolliver and I, through Resilience, we actually go into the Alvis House once a week to teach men who are in transition about fatherhood. And one of the things that we really apply is that baby mama. Baby mama, baby mama. You hear them guys saying baby mama. So we're trying to retrain these guys to say your child's mother, you know, because that changes the whole dynamic, right? It changes the whole dynamic. So we talk sometime, and they'll slip up and say, well, my baby mama, huh? Oh, that's right, my child's mother, you know. So it's something we were saying, it's effective when you continue to do it over and over repetitively, you know, but the thinking the thinking. She's not my baby's mama. She's my child's mother. That changed the whole dynamic.
Okay. Real quick, just as a joke, Dr. Dodley, bad boys ain't no good. Good boys ain't no fun. Lord knows that I should run off with the wrong one. It took me a minute, but I got it. Okay. I've got a couple questions, and I'm going to open it up. Some people have written questions down, but I'm going to open it up to the audience as well. Lisa and Dr. Ola, when we were doing our Think Aloud, during an actual situation, what happens during the 10 to 15 seconds you're thinking to yourself? And it would appear as though it's silence to the other person.
Well, actually, what we're doing, when we're teaching the steps of a skill, we acknowledge that this is slowed down, that it's a lot like when you're teaching a young child how to throw a baseball. You know, you have them stand a certain way, put their arm, hold the ball a certain way, put their arm back, you teach them the arm motion. I mean, if you did that during a baseball game, you'd never get anyone out. So it's just while you're learning the skill, you're slowing it down. One of the skills in problem solving is look at consequences and evaluate, you know, or look at choices and evaluate the consequences. And they were saying, you know, yeah, but if you're in a situation where it's fight or flight, or someone's going to fight you, you know, you don't have time to do it. One guy goes, oh, wait a minute, I did that. Some guy bumped into me and I spilled the drink, and I was like ready to fight him, but then I thought, no, I don't want to go to jail. I don't want to get in trouble over this. So he says, yeah, you really do have time to do that. So while we're doing teaching the skills, it is slowed down. But by practice, folks learn how to do it in real time in their real lives.
We do a lot of repetition where, you know, each of the steps of the skill might be said out loud 200 times in a class. You know, we'll read the skill. The participants will read the skill. They'll say it. They'll write it down. So the idea is just to get those steps in their brain, so when it comes time to use the skill, it doesn't take as long. At that point, you know it. It's more of a habit. So when you're actually practicing the skill, you know, in homework, for example, it's not going to take as long as it would during the practice in the class.
Okay, great. The next one, good question. How does cognitive behavioral therapy address the racial or ethnicity of the participants?
Well, let me say this, that I think that first of all, who they see automatically going to start relating to it. And if my audience, like I was in Oregon 2 weeks ago, and it was all white kids. I think I had 2 Native American kids up in there. But I still said, I asked them how many of them have been disrespected. I want to get this whole idea about the negative isms in our society. And all of them raised their hand. I said, well, there's a term I want you to adopt, and it means that I respectfully ask you for your attention. And I asked them, I said, I go. And one little girl said, I may. It laid me out. Now, the thing about it, I go means I respectfully ask you for your attention in Swahili. And I always phrase it by saying, no, the world is getting a lot smaller. So we need to know about each other. I started by asking them, how many of you know, how many boys in this room had questions about girls you don't know? Then the giggling starts. Raise your hand. And I asked the girls the same question. And the giggling starts. I said, we don't know enough about each other generally. How are we going to know? We got to know something about each other culturally, too, and racially. This sort of thing. So I go means I respectfully ask for your attention. If you say I may, that means you respectfully give it to me. So they do. The point is, I don't try to hide who I am, but to tell them from a frame of reference that this is what your ancestors did. You need to know how they navigated through life at the same time. This is why I encourage black kids, white kids, no matter different, to know about each other so we can dispel those myths that we have about each other. Because one thing about the human mind, if I don't know something about you, I'm going to create something. I got to make sense of something. So where did they get it from? So we started talking about, and I'll use examples like eating artichoke. How do you eat artichoke? That's the same way you should process your thinking. Start a layer at a time. I like to use metaphors and things like that with kids and have them figure out their own. You know, I still believe in that whole proverb. If you give a person a fish, give it to them. They'll eat every day. but you show them how to fish, they eat for a lifetime. So I think that it's important, you know, for a culturally approach, it's good. The same language, but maybe a different tone to it, you know. A car, but I might not want leather seats. I might want upholstery, but it's still going to take you where you want to go. So this is why I think that's important to use the background or the platform that they're standing on to get the message across.
And if I could, I don't want to piggyback on that, but if I could add to that, and to relate, I think not just young kids, but adults need something to relate to find a common purpose. Again, we go back to the fatherhood piece. We created something called 100 Urban Fathers, which Shay actually created, and we've taken 8 guys as the first 100 urban fathers because they're all fathers. They're white, they're black, they're Hispanic. We don't see color. All we see is fatherhood. So that's the relation that they have. So this is the first 8 of 100 urban fathers, okay, that will create 100 fathers in the urban community, no matter what color, no matter what shape, no age, they're all fathers. And that's what they relate to, and that bonds them together.
I also think that there's another interesting aspect to this, that you know, thinking about the way that different races think is very similar to thinking about how different races might ride a bicycle, right? We all ride a bicycle the same. You know, you balance, you hold the handlebars, you keep yourself right in the middle, you pedal your feet, you have the momentum that goes forward. It may be that what we think about is different, you know, but the way we think and the way we use our brains, inside we're all the same. So I think that cognition often follows that same rule, that you know, our neurons fire the exact same way, you know, our blood flows the exact same way, and so the steps that are provided in thinking for a change are good for anybody. You know, they just teach us how to think effectively.
You know, part of what's built into the program also kind of addresses this. And, you know, folks who come in and they don't want to be there. I mean, one of the challenges that Lisa and I often hear is, you know, what do you know about being a black man on the streets of Columbus? And I don't know that much about it. What the program does, though, is it's not so much about thinking in general, but it's about that person's thinking. When we're helping them learn how to pay attention to their thinking, and we're charting it, we carefully write down exactly how they're thinking it. We encourage them. Don't clean up your thoughts to put something acceptable up there, but we want to know exactly how the thought pops off in your head. So there's cursing, there's, you know, we try to keep it real to respect where they're coming from. Because our goal is for them to be able to take those thoughts captive, to be able to identify what their thoughts are. So it's all about their own framework. So we really try and build that in there, which really does respect their personhood, their thoughts, helping them to decide what are the risky thoughts that are leading me in the wrong direction, helping them come up with their thoughts, their new thinking that's going to help them move in a more positive direction. It's not a canned program. Each person individualizes it for himself or herself.
And we try to set that up the very first day of class. You know, we have a couple of rules. You have to have some rules for a good group process. You got to be here. You got to be on time. You got to participate. But we also talk a lot about respect. And we don't just say be respectful. We say, what does that mean to you? And we let them define that, and we put that up on chart paper. We talk a lot about how, you know, we're going to be talking about beliefs and attitudes. We don't all share the same beliefs and attitudes, but we're going to be open to those differences, you know, and be respectful of those differences.
You know, I just want to add, too, that something I like what Doc said about the cussing. Every now and then, because you don't want to tell them, don't do that, because then you're going to shut them down. Right. But a lot of times I'll tell them, you know, you have to be bilingual. You know, the market language is King's English. Now, until we get more power, then you can start using that other stuff, but you don't have the power. It's all based on power. Also, I think it's important to understand them that I like agreements instead of rules. Now, because rules are meant to be what? Broken. Rules are meant to be what? Okay. So y'all said it. So they do it too. So then we go into the whole thing of what's the difference between a rule and an agreement. And again, what sticks its head up is the misuse of power. And power is the ability for me to make my reality your reality. If I can do that, that's power. So if I can do it to myself, then I got power with myself. And it goes right back to something biblical that says, know thyself. We take it all the way back to that. So I understand, but it's like a new language for them. But it's in there. They just have to retrieve it and take their time about doing it. They might not be able to do it quickly, but at least they know how to do it. One thing about rational motor therapy, it asks you, if you have that irrational thought, you write down what you should do if you don't do it. That's your homework assignment. Write it down. You ain't no good as the father. Well, I am good. I work. I really want for forgiveness. And one of the biggest things is self-forgiveness. A lot of these guys and a lot of these young people come out of prison, don't forget themselves. They get to thinking about how they treated their kids when they were locked up, yada, yada, yada. Now you got a whole new kind of worms you got to deal with. Because a lot of these kids don't want their dads or moms coming out of prison. They want them, but they don't know how to show that I miss you. And anger and hurt, they are cousins to each other. Let them know that. Because sometimes anger is not anger. It's something else. So anyway.
I like that. We call our rules expectations because we thought that sounded better than rules, but I like agreement much better.
Yeah.
I like that idea.
So that's between you and I, or yourself and the group. Or, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I have one more written down from the audience, and I know we have a couple questions. So, in light of the cameras, those who in the audience have questions, if we could line up over here, and we'll start fielding questions from the audience. For the panel, besides working with prison offenders and grouping them by their offense, do you consider any other diagnosis that may impact their ability to use CBT?
Well, I would guess if someone were actively psychotic and like their thinking is not bound by rationality, they probably would not be able to participate.
I would also feel a person who's actively still using drugs. Of alcohol or any, that would probably hinder what's going on. So we always ask to be clean and find what that birthday is for them to get that out the way.
Because we're thinking.
Yeah.
And that's the key. And I can't think with a cloud of smoke in my head. So.
Okay. T.Y., you have a couple questions?
I have two questions, just speaking from an offender's point of view. My first question is, how long does an offender have to, well, actually I have three questions. My first question is, can an offender participate in your program, Ms. Morgan or Doctor?
Yeah, generally, since Doc and I work for the Adult Parole Authority, the clients that we're working with are on parole or post-release control. There are other agencies throughout Columbus that also work with ex-offenders where the program might also be offered.
Such as resilience?
Okay. My next question is, how long does an offender have to be released before they can get involved into the program?
1 day.
Yeah.
1 day?
Yeah, particularly for high-risk folks, we like to have them come in as early as possible.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter the degree of felony that you have?
No.
Yeah, we tend to focus more on risk of reoffending, which doesn't necessarily correlate with like a felony level, for example. So when we talk about, moderate or high risk offenders, we're talking about people who have started committing criminal behavior at an early age, people who have more than one criminal offense, people who are, younger, people who have violated parole or probation in the past. Those are things that have been shown by research to be predictors of recidivism. So we're going to focus on the people who are higher risk of reoffending, and we do that through, our own risk and needs assessment that each person would complete that comes to our office.
Okay, thank you.
Even with substance abuse too, right? Is that a one that's looked at as well? If you have a history of substance abuse?
Substance abuse is a predictor, but not as big a predictor as some people think. Yeah.
Okay, and we have about 6 minutes to go. Miss Gloria has a question. I'm going to let her address.
6 minutes, though.
No.
What I was writing down was the effect of cultural messages that need confronting, analyzing, and sometimes communication with others. And at that point, you need to get support. One of the messages that comes through loud and clear in my community is, especially for male children, you're either going to be in jail or dead. And they're not, and usually I ask them, well, what are you doing now? I mean, sometimes these kids are 7, 8, 9 years old. What are you doing now that might end you up in jail? And many times the response is, I'm like my daddy, or I'm like my brother. So I was wondering, how would you do that? The other one is more, I get very angry right now at the fear messages that has been going on in our country day after day. Somebody's going to kill you. I heard my president called a thug, called dangerous. You threaten me, as somebody got their fingers in his face. And this is happening on television every day. So what kind of messages are we giving to certain populations? And how do I get them through this model to begin to look at those cultural messages that's coming 24/7, and they are actually targeting you?
Thank you, Gloria.
I would say that, and Ms. Robinson, I've been knowing her for years, and she's always been a force in the community, been very positive. For me, on a personal level, too, even with my own personal kids. She's helped raise them. Most of the time, I'll start my classes off with the missocialization that we got. And I use a term called the eye of the hurricane. In other words, where's that calmness we feel, even though all this stuff is going around us? Where do we find peace? Where's it at? And I still believe that a lot of our social ills are built around, are manifested around racism, sexism, adultism. Ism has a tendency to have a negative connotation. And I also remind kids that we weren't born that way, that there's always something out there trying to make you look bad. Now, I like the way Obama's handling this. He didn't retaliate. He let it go. My college professor told me, I have to tell you this now, I don't know if you know Dr. Joseph Caranta or not, but Dr. Caranta was one of the people who helped me learn at Ohio State University, and I got a call before I got here that he's dying. And he told me, he said that, you know what, Dudley? He said, you won't make as much money as a white psychologist. I said, Doc, I'm not in it for the money. I'm in it to be empowered to help make some decisions about people, period. Black kids, white kids, to make any difference. We have to learn that there are things that you learn that's not innate, that you can unlearn, period. And I think it's important for these kids to know where it comes from. I make references to George Jefferson and Archie Bunker all the time. You know, and the kids might not know who they are, a lot of them, but older kids might say, I know who it is. That guy don't like no black people, and there's a black man who don't like white people. Yeah, it's a metaphor. So it really takes somebody to sit down and talk to these kids. You know, we don't take the time. But sometimes the adults don't know as well. So we teach the adults to work with our kids. I can ask the average kid where their ancestry is from, for example, and even some of our black kids are saying, well, I got some Native American in me. I got some little Asian. But they want to deny being black. And it's all because of the myths that have been stirred up about Africa. They think Timbuktu is in Texas someplace. They don't know that one richer country. The point I'm trying to make is this. Rites of passage for every culture it helps facilitate a healthy way to look at other people, period. You've got to know your rites of passage. Life magazine has it costs $12, but it has a copy of all the different religions in the East, in the Far East, fighting for this position. And they break it down real nice. I advocate everybody read that because we're more global now. I try to tell kids all the time, we're more global. We can't be just local. The whole world is looking at you united. states. Now they're calling us just states because we're not united. And we break it down, talk to them that way. Tell kids all the time, we can't just be right here in Columbus, Ohio. You got to know what's going on. And I get a little rewards. Tell me something global that's happening. You'd be surprised. Now they're looking at the paper, reading stuff, and learning more about who they really are. One of the things about rites of passage, I think, and tying the stuff in, is that it's not your fault. And the way I tell them that, I'll ask them if they know right from wrong. One little thing, kids, I like kids. I ask them like, everybody here probably heard it, but I'll ask them to, if you know right from wrong, yeah, I know right from wrong. Then I'll hold a white piece of paper. And I'll ask them to repeat the color of this paper about 3 or 4 times. Can I indulge you to do it? The audience? All right. What color is this paper? Everybody? A little louder? Louder? Come on, y'all. What's your color? Now, what do cows drink? Cows drink? Cows drink water. Now, what I'm trying to say is this. We break it down and understand that sometimes people associate things with things that's negative. That's not right. In other words, it takes time to work with these kids. You just can't say, do this. Why? To me, a sign of intelligence when you ask why. And I do parenting classes too, because you have to be comprehensive and work with these folks nowadays and work with the kids. So I don't know if that answers the question or not, but I do think that we have to be honest with it. And one of the things when I'm talking about racial issues or cultural issues, the agreement I have is amnesty, forgiveness. If Nelson Mandela can do it, we can do it. Then who is Nelson Mandela? Oh, all right, now we got another one going on.
I just wanted to clarify, when I said cultural, I didn't mean race. I know. Really am talking about what is going on in America
as a whole,
through all of these mechanisms that we interact with.
And Gloria, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open it up. We've got to go ahead and close due to time constraints, so I'm going to bring Gail Gray up to the podium. But please feel free, if you want to interact with the panelists at the end of the show, feel free to do so.
Can I say this
Gail?
too? That I want to interact as well. I have a graduation of impact workers, of the guys who've been through this program at 1:30 at the Urban League. I just wanted to say that. So if I walk up, not trying to be rude, just that I got to be there for them. Okay.
First, tell me, do I have this right? I have to be thinking, okay? I would like to thank everyone on this panel. I learned a lot today, and I appreciate everything. And could everyone please give them a round of applause? Thank you so much. And on behalf of our director, Napoleon Bell, and the City of Columbus Community Relations Commission, we are very, very happy to have you here as panelists, and of course the participants. Those of you in the television audience, we thank you for tuning in, and again, thank the panel, and we appreciate everybody being here.